Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Walk the walk. Rip Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Today, we've got a special guest, Steven Nelson of MLB Network, Intentional Talk, Apple TV as well. Steven, I know busy is the right word to describe the life of somebody covering Major League Baseball at the end of September, so we appreciate you joining us. How are you doing?
I mean, hey, we're all busy. We all got our stuff. We all got families and the little ones running around. Hence, I'm outside my kids' playful dungeon. No, it's been a long regular season. I'm amped up. We're ready for the run for the World Series, expanded postseason. So that'll be enough of an energy boost to get me through this 2022. How about you?
Yeah, we're hanging in. I mean, it's like you. It's like the end of September is better than maybe the beginning of August, when it feels like the regular season is nowhere near ending. As a Dodger fan, it's been a weird experience because they feel like they haven't been playing meaningful games in weeks, if not months. And yet the end is in sight. We got 9 games left as we sit here and record this. And so as a Dodger fan, there's optimism, there's hope. Of course, there's people that are worried about the rotation and the bullpen, and we can get into that in a little bit. But the baseball season's a grind, but the end is in sight. So we're feeling good about it.
Hey, and Dodger fans should. It's been unbelievable. I hate using unbelievable. So it has been an incredible, wow, really went into the bag of adjectives there. Incredible year. I mean, it's franchise record in wins. It's just, despite a lot of people, I think from the wide lens, people look at the Dodgers record and success, and they're either like, wow, that's not a surprise, it's the Dodgers. And 2, wow, they really haven't been tested, and maybe not tested externally, but internally they absolutely have been.
Yeah.
And so for them to kind of charge through that and persevere and be this force, it deserves a ton of attention.
Yeah, I mean, like we've got a show that we did a couple days ago, and we were talking about 106 wins is the franchise record as we sit here on Tuesday morning. They are at that mark with 9 to go. It's the franchise record. The Dodgers have put up 106 wins in each of the last 3 full seasons. Now, that doesn't include 2020. Well, guess what? In 2020, they set the franchise record for win percentage. And so we're talking about a franchise that has 140 years of history, and we're literally watching the best regular season that they have ever had at a full-length pace. And so just to pause and appreciate that is, I think, necessary, but it's also hard when, again, they're like 21 games up in the division and clinching everything with weeks to go. So I think it's easy to bypass that. And so I just am constantly trying to remind myself and the people that watch our show, listen to us, hey, appreciate, take advantage of what's in front of you.
That's it's great advice. It really is. Because you don't want to take for granted this. It's not just this year or these past 3 or 4 years or 5 years. This is a decade now.
Yep.
This is 9 division titles in 10 years.
Yeah.
9 division titles, not just squeaking into the postseason and getting in. These are winning crowns. Like, there are franchises that don't have that many total postseason appearances ever, right? Yeah. So while the expectations are much, much different in LA with the Dodgers, I get that. You never know. You never know. Despite resources and stuff, there could be a downturn, and then you're going to be thinking, "Wow, like that run was truly special." So I hope the fans listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was born right after the Dodgers won the title in '88. They didn't win a playoff game until I was like 16 years old, and so 9 out of 10 division titles. And by the way, the 10th was they lose in by a hair to the Giants and then beat them in the playoffs. So we'll take that one. We'll count that as almost as good as 10 out of 10.
Definitely, as you should.
Well, hey, I know I want to talk about the Dodgers in a little bit. I want to talk about your experience calling games on Apple TV, but I got to start with sort of a moment you nearly got to experience. I sent you a message about this. You guys get 1 game a week, and I'm not necessarily entirely sure how those games are chosen. I know they're chosen like at the beginning of the month, and maybe, but here you are, September 23rd. You're in Yankee Stadium on what potentially could be the night where Aaron Judge is going to hit home run number 61. And so you go wherever you want with this one. I'm just curious, like, what's that moment like? What's that place like? What are your nerves like? That's got to be an intense feeling knowing that in Yankee Stadium, history is there and you're on the call.
That's intense is the perfect word for everything. Everything was ratcheted up. I mean, look, there was a lot of outside noise going into that broadcast from the New York media market. I don't want to get into that because it was just a lot of noise. I'll use a PG term. What bothered me about it was that I felt like it was making this run for Judge or that night about anything other than what it should be about, and that's Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
It's about him. It's about his family, the people that helped him get there, and what he could potentially do that night. So, there was a lot to sort of fight through. All in all, man, it was just a really, it was just a great learning experience for me, being a young play-by-play guy, being put in a position like that where you have to be able to manage all of that, like your emotions, an understanding of the moment, like just realizing, what's in front of us, not getting too far ahead of yourself, because I was trying to tell people who were getting angry, like, hey, it might not happen. And ultimately,
Right.
It didn't. We can't control that. You can't script the unpredictable. And that's what baseball is every single night that we play it. So it was great for me to be in that environment. And I'll be honest, I there were times where I let it get to me. I let it impact how I was going about my job. Now, I say that from the standpoint of it was my plan or goal going in to be as understated as possible. This moment isn't about our booth or our broadcast or our call. It was trying to let Judge, the fans, Yankee Stadium, Yankees, Red Sox, let all that speak for itself. And if it happened, do not say too much. Get out of the way and let the moment breathe. But in doing that, I felt at times throughout the rest of the broadcast, outside Judge's ABs, I felt like that mindset of being understated, I let it teeter. This is my in the weeds self.
Yeah. No, it's good.
I let that sort of push us toward maybe a little dull at times. But again, I am a hypercritic of myself. I annoy my wife and my family and friends with it. And fans got to know, just like with players, if Chris Taylor or I don't want to, if any player goes through like a 4 for 36 stretch where they got 18 Ks, nobody knows that they're 4 for 36 with 18 Ks better than said player.
Yeah.
From a broadcasting standpoint, nobody knows that there was a misspeak or a missed opportunity, or you didn't bring that juice to a moment more than the broadcaster. So all of that to say, it was just a learning experience that I'm going to cherish for a long, long time, and hopefully get better from it.
And I don't want to dwell on this too much longer, because I know there's probably people like, hey, I thought we were going to talk Dodgers, and we are. But I mean, like, the last question I want to ask, because I'm so curious, like, do you script something ahead of time? Like, do you have a note in front of you that, like, if Judge hits 61, I'm going to say some version of this? I have thought out kind of what my line is going to be.
You know what? It's a good question. I got it a lot last week from coworkers, and I've never done that in my career, but I'd be lying if I told you I didn't think about it for this one.
Sure.
And every time I would put something down in my brain and say it back to myself, it would come across as written. And you can't have that. Because again, if you have a line prepared and there's a descriptor in there, but the way the ball comes off the bat isn't the same as that descriptor, then well, fans aren't stupid. Fans aren't stupid. You can go back and listen to a lot of big moments and calls, and I do think there are times where you can tell. And hey, no shade, because again, I was thinking about it here, where they had something ready to go in case it happened. I just didn't want to put myself in a position to sound even more like an idiot. So I thought about it, and when I said everything back to myself, it just came off as like, you're trying too hard. You're doing too much. Just like I said earlier, let the moment speak for itself and get out the way.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I joked with you afterwards that little did you know that you were in the wrong park that night because Apple TV had Dodgers Cardinals where Pujols goes yard twice and hits number 700. And just a comical thing because we're all thinking like Dodger fans, some of us were like, all right, well, how do I keep an eye on what Judge is doing while also watching the Dodger game? None of us thinking Pujols is going to do that on that night twice. Yeah. And yet, the history is made in Dodger Stadium, not in Yankee Stadium. Just a funny thing. So,
it was hilarious. We were in the car on the way leaving the ballpark afterwards, and we had known that he hit one.
Okay. And
then he hit the second. We were all going nuts. We were so ecstatic for Wayne and CY and Russ and Trishka and the crew because look, like I said, it's been a long year for a lot of us, and they deserve that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sorry, Jeff. I do have to say, like, the fans who were, it was more so New York than in terms of the volume compared to the people from St. Louis. I do have to acknowledge the home broadcast teams, and we talked about this a little bit last time, right? Like, the broadcast booths and the reporters, like that is the fans halfway to their favorite teams. And they feel like they know the broadcasters better than the players at times. So to not have that connection, that bond for even just one game, especially games where history is right there, it's just it's an uncomfortable thing to say the least. So.
Well, and I mean, I love that you're aware of it, and you give a shout out to the home broadcasters every single time, both broadcast booths, and I know you've made mention of that on your social media account, which I love. And I just love that you're aware because, again, like if Joe Davis doesn't get to call Albert Pujols hitting the 700th home run on a night when maybe he normally would have been in the booth, it's not your fault. Like, just because you're the guy that is or is not calling it, it's not like it was up to Steven Nelson to decide, like, hey, sorry, Joe, I got this one. I'm going to tap you out right when things are about to get good. And yet, I feel for people in your position because you're the front-facing guy. And so if the New York media has an issue with the fact that the game's going to be on Apple TV, you're the one, or Hunter Pence is the one, or Katie Nolan's the one, or CY is the one that ends up getting blasted. And so I feel empathy for people like you who take the brunt of, and we're going to get into some of the Apple TV stuff here in just a little bit, but you take the brunt of criticism for decisions that you have literally no business in making, and in many cases, I won't speak for you, would have made completely differently if they were up to you. And so I empathize with you in those situations.
Well, that perspective is one that I believe is rare among sport fans, not Dodger fans, just baseball fans, or it's definitely one that permeates throughout all sport. So I'll joke with some people who they go about it the wrong way, and they'll be a little extra with their message. They'll be like, "Yes, I made this decision because I hate you specifically."
Yeah, exactly.
It's the old cliche, right? Control what you can control.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the Dodgers. I'll ask you a broad question first, and then get maybe a little more specific. You're a guy. The reason I wanted to ask you these questions is because you have a national perspective that sometimes somebody like myself, the people that watch our show, don't. Like, not only are we watching the Dodgers 95% of the time, but we're not going to other parks. We're not hanging out with folks in the Yankees and the Red Sox and all that. Or in your case, sitting on MLB Network and talking with former baseball players, Hall of Famers, that kind of thing. And so I'll start big with, when you think of the Dodgers, what's the first thing you think of? Like, what's maybe the word or the thing about them that you're like, this rises to the top when I think about the Dodgers?
Wagon. I mean, this is just an absolute freight train.
Yeah.
Truthfully, we talked about this last time. Like, the organizations around the game that I admire the most, and I would say Tampa Bay and LA, and obviously there's a tie there with Andrew Friedman. Difference in resources, but they still attack their organizational goals the same way, in that there has to be a total approach. It isn't just about the big league roster.
Yeah.
It's also minor league synergy and development. It's drafting and developing. They identify better than anyone. So that's the thing that jumps out to me as just a fan. There's envy. I wish my favorite team, which is the White Sox. I wish that they
pretty much the same thing. Tony La Russa, Andrew Friedman. I mean, we're basically talking about guys that probably are very similar, right?
Jeff, I'm hanging up now. No, yeah, totally. No, so there's some envy. There's some
Yeah.
envy there, in that admiration, and you wish that it's like, hey, just like that's the blueprint. You obviously don't have the same amount of monies,
Yeah.
because teams are scared. And most
Yeah, you do have the same amount of monies in many cases, but you're unwilling to use the same amount of monies.
correct. So it's just like, hey, at least, yeah. So it's kind of mind blowing that teams don't do that, but then you get to that
Yeah.
conversation we're getting to, and then it's like, okay, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But hey, you own something, you can do whatever you want. So I think it's just the top to bottom approach. It's not top heavy. They didn't just buy their team,
Yeah.
which I think is the misconception or the ignorant hatred that you would throw at a team like the Dodgers. Like, oh wait, so they got Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts and Trey Turner. Like, they didn't draft or develop any of these guys. They signed them or they traded prospects for them, and who knows? Well, yeah, but good on them for doing so. But in addition to those stars, which could be the best top three in the lineup ever,
Yeah.
they also have reclamation projects, late bloomers, players who were once at the peak of their position in their sport, who are now down here, but they're still getting them to come to the ballpark every day and contribute, a la Cody Bellinger.
Yeah.
So it's a top to bottom machine, and I think, like I said, there's a lot of admiration, envy, or in some cities, hate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm glad that you say that, because that's something, it's almost like I think about the hate that you probably get for the worlds that you live in. I mean, that's the beef that Dodger fans typically get, is you just bought your team. And it's like, just look at like every level. I mean, Evan Phillips is one of the 5 best relief pitchers in baseball this season. Anybody could have had him. The Dodgers claimed him and have turned him into the best player. Then you've got obviously some MVP candidates in Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, who were signed or traded for, sure. But then look at Julio Urias, who's in the NL Cy Young conversation, international free agent, signed, developed, and a guy that nobody wanted.
Yes, and we talked about Julio specifically last time as being, a guy that we view as one of the more underrated aces in baseball, along with Max Fried. I think Logan Webb was the other. Sandy Alcantara. That's changed totally. Yeah. But for Julio, it hasn't. Julio, it hasn't. It's still the same with him, and it bothers me to no end. But you know what? What I'm most excited about for the Dodgers and their fans who feel that way, that this October, those guys that the fans outside of Dodgertown are saying that they bought their team. Oh, it's Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler, who's not there, or Blake Trinan, who's not there, and that there's going to be guys like Phillips and Tyler Anderson and these people who emerged this year out of nowhere to be massive contributors on this team. People are going to be like, oh, I didn't know Tyler Anderson. Like, Tyler Anderson is a guy that I'll just tell you, we were in Yankee Stadium last week and talking to a member of or the Red Sox rather, and for their pitching staff, they were using stats and footage of Anderson to show their guys and be like, hey, like, this is something that we've seen league wide that we feel could help you. So they're not using just the big name star from LA. They're using someone like Tyler, who has taken his career to a whole nother level in 2022. Like, hey, why don't you learn from him? Why don't you treat him? So I thought that really spoke volumes of what the league thinks of LA.
Yeah, well, and hey, it doesn't hurt that Tyler Anderson's a Eugene guy, right? Had a couple of those Ducks cruise through Dodgers this year, which has been nice for me, and I know you're one guy that can appreciate that.
I mean, Jake Reed having that moment. I mean, I covered Jake and Janie when they were at U of O, so it was just like, wow.
Yeah, Clevenger's been up there too. I mean, they've had some guys filter through, so it's been a good run for the Ducks. You kind of mentioned, I'll ask one more question. You sit with CC Sabathia, Sean Casey, some of these guys. I mean, former players, like, what do they say about the Dodgers? What do they know? I mean, they probably know guys like Dave Roberts somewhat personally, but like, what's their take on the Dodgers?
I think they're sort of dumbfounded at this point. Like, they don't know what else there is to say. And you're right, there are a lot of ties to Doc. Like Millar played with them in 2004, right? CC played with them in the minors growing up. Like, there's a lot of tie. Everybody knows and loves Doc.
Yeah.
So I think there's just, at this point, given the run of success, it's like you're running out of things to say about LA. And thankfully, because of the emergence of new characters,
Yeah.
There are different stories to talk about, but you're kind of just. I definitely get the sense from him in meetings sometimes. Where you're just like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what you want me to say. Like the Dodgers are really bleeping good, so
Yeah.
that could be a short segment,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at this point the industry is just sort of like, yeah,
Yeah.
no, we don't,
Yeah. How
we
many
don't
ways can we say Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts are really good at hitting baseballs?
for sure. And again, even in those situations, like Freddie's on the verge of doing something never done in his All-Star MVP career. That's when a batting title. So like, they may have had the division sewn up now for a few weeks and nothing left to play for since they locked up the 1 seed. But for all those guys on the roster, there are little hurdles or little finish lines ahead that they're chasing to get them ready for October. So it's not just like they're just coasting to the finish line. They got roster spots to play for.
Yeah.
They got to play for. Health is obviously the biggest thing for this team, but with less than 10 games to go, there's still a lot to watch LA for.
Yeah, I love it. All right, well, I want to honor your time. Let me end with one question about Apple TV, and you can be as brief or as long as you would like to be. I know this is the first year of this. You and I talked a lot about this the first time you came on. You have been open and honest about, like, look, we all know that the initial reaction was not positive. And, I'm sure you would gauge your mentions and say maybe that initial reaction has been sustained through September here. And I would argue from the outside that, like, knowing what I know, that I don't think a lot of people, yourself included, the folks on your team, were necessarily set up perfectly for success. But now that we're here 5 to 6 months in, kind of how would you evaluate the overall, how this has gone? You guys have tried some things which I like. Are there things that you're like, we brought this, nobody's tried it, and it was awesome? Or how would you evaluate? Take it wherever you want to take it.
To me, I think there's, on behalf of the crew, I think there's a lot for us to be proud of, in that this was a good first year. I think we learned a lot about ourselves, one, but two, also where the game is at. We're baseball diehards. We know that of all sports, baseball is the one most rooted in routine and tradition, players and fans alike. So if it's a rule change or a roster change, or a trade or free agent leaves and somebody comes in, but that player was popular, new broadcast, like it's not always received. In fact, I would say it would be at the other end of the spectrum. Now, I don't say that to sort of like sweep under the rug or discount any of the feedback and criticism that has been put our way. Like, trust me, I have a note in here that's just littered with stuff that, if I have a chance to talk to people who actually make the decisions, this is where I would tweak. This is what I would improve. This is what I would do differently. So my hope is that we take this off season to really step back and figure out what that is, how we can evolve. But two, I also think that with time, I hope anyway, that fans will settle in. I do think that we made improvements along the way, because it's year one and was really 25 games. Think about that. Like, you listen to your teams 162 times per year, basically. And over years, we have 25 games. So, like, we have to earn that trust from fans. That's my opinion. We have to work to earn that. It's not going to be given to us. And nor should it be. So I'm just hopeful that we could tweak that. Let me ask you, man. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. We talked about it, off the record and off camera. What were your thoughts as a fan, as a viewer? Like, from the beginning of the season, you saw us week 2, and then you saw us second to last week of the season when the Dodgers were in it.
No, I mean, I'm being honest when I say, like, I think it has gotten a lot better. Like, I think that first one from the outside, it was sort of like, all right, there's some choppiness here. This feels like a new thing, and not just because it's new, but it actually is coming across as new, which, we've been over that piece of it. But I do think it's gotten better. And I'll say this about Apple TV. So a couple things that I like is, I like that you guys tried some new things. Like, I think, yes, baseball is a game of tradition, and yes, like, people want the same old, but it's like, when I see Sunday Night Baseball and it's like, okay, here comes a national broadcaster who's just going to try and give me the exact same experience that Joe Davis gives me every week, like, you're not going to be able to. And so I like when Sunday Night Baseball, for example, is like, let's interview some guys in the middle of the game. Let's put mics on them in the field. I like that your guys' graphics look different. I like that some of the camera stuff is different. Like, to me, just trying new things, I'm like, let's try those things, because I would argue some of those things have been successful. Now, some of them haven't. Like, I've joked about the odds of reaching base stuff, and I know you have heard about that a million more times, but, I laugh when there was one point where a guy was down 0-1 and the odds of reaching base was like 33%, and then he goes down 0-2 and the odds of reaching base are now 43%. I'm like, that's amazing. This guy hits better with 2 strikes than he does with 1. This is amazing.
Maybe it was because it was Trey Turner with 2 strikes and Tony La Russa was in the other dugout. Is that why?
Could have been. That could have been. I like that.
No, I look. If you've gotten to know me over this year, I think fans who watch the network, I'm a big proponent of just like, let's just try it.
Yeah.
And like, those dozen things, maybe only one works. And it's like, okay, well, then we know like those other 11, let's just leave those aside. But I want to try and knowing that, when you're the first one over the wall like that,
totally.
The initial reaction isn't going to be super like, yes, this is amazing. But again, that's not to say that there aren't so many things for us as, an inexperienced booth that we can and should. And for my money, for my seat, we will do better if we're back next year.
Yeah. I also got to say, I need less Hunter Pence on Dodgers Giants games. I mean, I know there's only so much you guys can do on this, but it's like, okay, you've done a good job. Like, I think he's done as well as he possibly could, is coming across as not Mr. Giants guy. But as a Dodgers fan, it's like, what are we going to do? Bumgarner in the booth next year? It's like the guys that it's personal for me.
It's so funny. I was joking with some of my Dodger fan friends and family back home before that game. I was like, I promise you, I'm aware of the Hunter Pence bias, and I will do my best as a native Southern Californian to balance that out as we go along for this game.
Well, it didn't help that they were like retiring his number or whatever the next day, and it was like a whole weekend of celebrations. I'm like, I don't need this in my life.
I know, and Dodgers should know that, like, directive from on high before that game was like, hey, don't make this about Hunter specifically. And Hunter was on board with that. He's very uncomfortable with that spotlight anyway. But it was just, we know there's a really best team in baseball is also on the field with one of the more disappointing ones. So we're gonna be sure to have that awareness. So all in all, like I'm glad that we got to finish up with the Dodger game late, and because I appreciate every chance that I get to watch them up close. Like, I got a family tie to Trace Thompson, so I love his journey and what he's done this year. I mean, he's not just going to have a spot on the roster; he's going to have a role come postseason for Trace. So I mean, those are the stories that I'm going to focus on, as opposed to the tired narratives that are tied to ignorance, about the Dodgers.
I love it. Well, Stephen, hey, I appreciate your time. Anything you want to plug? Shows you got coming up, that kind of thing?
No, man. Like, we're getting back into the swing of things on Intentional Talk, and we'll be traveling for the World Series, and who knows, maybe that'll bring Kevin and I back home to LA, and then we can meet and do something in person, man. That would be great.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you, Stephen, for all your time. You can check out Stephen at Stephen Nelson on Twitter. At least we appreciate it. We'll see you all over the place, I'm sure, in the postseason and hopefully deep into the World Series. So thanks again for your time.
Can't say thanks to you enough, man. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you this year, Jeff. You do sincerely and objectively. I told you this before. I would tell you to do it. You do an awesome job. Awesome.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Well, everybody, thanks for watching. You can check us out at Dodger Blue 1958 on social media, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network as well. Enjoy the rest of your day and go Dodgers.